Those of you from the Chicago area probably know by now that Bishop Claude Porter of the Proviso Baptist Church in Maywood, Illinois, passed away at age 88. He was my childhood pastor. I would have very much liked to have spoken at his funeral, but I realize that there are many people who could give remarks about his life and that you can't put everybody on a program. So I understand. But what I would like to do now is to make a tribute, a video tribute to Bishop Porter. I am sitting inside of the McMahan Chapel outside of St. Augustine, Texas. This building is said to be the oldest Protestant church in Texas. So let me begin, because Bishop Porter would always say, get to your text. He would tell young preachers, get to your text. So I don't consider this a sermon, but my text is 2 Timothy 1 and 6 in verse 7. And it says, hence, and this is Paul writing, hence I would remind you to rekindle, I think the King James Version says, stir up the divine gift which you received when my hands were laid upon you. For God has not given us a timid spirit, but a spirit of power and love and discipline. So this is Paul writing his mentee, Timothy, and telling Timothy, stir up your gifts, work up these gifts, do things, don't just sit by. And he said, God has not given us a spirit of timidity. That's the proper translation. King James Version says fear, but no, it's timidity. Fear can be a good thing. If you're jogging and there's a mountain lion after you, you may need a little bit of fear to get out of the lion's way. So the proper word is timidity. So Paul is telling his mentee, don't be timid. Use your gifts. And so that's what Bishop Porter allowed to happen at Proviso Baptist Church. Now, let me get this out of the way. There are several forms of church government. There's the congregational form of government where the people, it's just democratic. They rule the church. They run the church. They can get rid of their pastor whenever they vote on it. There's also the Presbyterian form of government where elders, a group of elders, govern the church. They guide the church. They're in charge of doctrine and things like that. Then there is the authoritarian, or some people may call it the Episcopalian form of church government. Now, that form of government is where one man is the human head of the church. Now, I think those who are familiar with Proviso Baptist Church know how that church was structured. Bishop Porter was not shy about letting anyone know who was the human head of that church. Now, people have different views about how the church, the congregations ought to be run. We're not going to debate that today. But I will say this, if I had to be under an authoritarian bishop, one man in charge, essentially, of everything, I would rather it be Bishop Claude Porter. Here's the reason why. Because just like Paul encouraged Timothy to stir up his gifts, that's what Bishop Porter did for the congregants and visitors who came into Proviso Baptist Church. And he didn't hog the pulpit either. There have been many speakers who have come in and out of that church and have preached right in the pulpit. Trust me, some were better than others. All right. But another thing too, children. Back in the day, there was a saying, children should be seen and not heard. But Bishop Porter didn't live by that philosophy. He allowed children to do things. Now, Greg Kelly, that's a friend of mine. He also grew up at Proviso Baptist Church. He says that as a little boy, he was on the usher board and he sang in the choir. And so that helped him. That enabled him to be the man that he is today, a union leader in the city of Chicago and surrounding areas. A man that knows the governor, knows the former president. So these are the things, and other youth. Myself, I was able to give my graduation speech from 8th grade. I graduated from 8th grade. I was a valedictorian. I gave my valedictorian, what do they call it, the farewell address, whatever it's called. And he attended my graduation. And then that Sunday morning, he had me give the graduation speech right in the pulpit. You know, a lot of churches, if you're not a licensed preacher, you stand at a podium to the side. But here I am, 14 years old, standing, boom, right in the pulpit, giving my speech. And I remember that. Another thing, too, is the Baptist Association in Illinois would have speakers tournaments. And I would participate in the speakers tournament. I would go down to Springfield. And for some reason, I was second place. Maybe the other people were better than me. I don't know. But anyway, he would still have me and others who were in the contest give our speeches during the service. And he would allow, if it were 2 or 3 speakers, he would let us teenagers give our speeches, and he wouldn't preach that day. That's the type of man that he was. Other people who I talked to remember the days of being in the children's choir. I was in the children's choir, and he let us sing on live radio. So these are the things, the spiritual gifts that were stirred up by this man, allowing us to do things. I remember visiting, this is after I moved to Texas. I was a part of a ministerial training program. Wasn't a licensed minister, but whenever I'd come back to Proviso, he'd say, come on up, Ed. He'd invite me to sit in the pulpit. I was content sitting in the audience, but he'd have me come up, sit in the pulpit. Another thing about Bishop Porter, he was a champion for the poor. He founded, I'm not sure if he founded, but he became president in 1968. I guess maybe he was the founder of PLCCA, the Proviso Light and Council for Community Action, nonprofit organization that assisted people with utilities, food, rent, all types of things like that. Now, I believe that part of the reason why he had a heart for the poor was because he grew up in poverty in Memphis, Tennessee. His father passed away at an early age. James Porter, I believe was his name, if I'm not mistaken. And then his mother, Corrine Howard Porter, raised, it was a lot of children, a lot of sons, I think maybe some daughters too. But I remember Bishop Porter saying right in the pulpit that as a child, there were times where he and his siblings were in such need until their mother gave them a peppermint stick and they divided it, and that was their food. So a lot of times the experiences of people guide what and who they become as adults. Another thing about the authoritarian way in which many people say he governed the church, that very well could be a product of the fact that one of his mentors, his pastoral mentors, was a pastor and his congregation got rid of him. And so to witness that very well could affect a person. I'm not here to defend all of the decisions that Bishop Porter made, because some of them I didn't agree with and don't agree with to this day. But that gives you a little bit of context that enables you to understand some of these things. And so his favorite song was Precious Lord, Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I'm not going to sing it because I'm inside of a chapel. I might end up getting kicked out of this building, making too much noise. But another thing, too, is my brother and I would imitate Bishop Porter. I might have been 2, 3 years old. My brother was, I guess, 5, or maybe even younger than that. He might have been 4. I might have been 1. But anyway, when we would get home after church service, we would get our dad's dress shirt, because obviously we're tiny. So the dress shirt served as a robe. We would put on his dress shirt, and it looked like a preacher's robe. And my brother would start preaching, and I imitated him. All power in heaven and earth is in my hand. We would do that. And so my mother remembers that to this day. My cousins remember that to this day. All power. We'd get up there and say that as children. Another thing, too, is, and I don't want to be too long, is, and I want to give my condolences to Sister Ernestine Porter. Now, she was not officially my first Sunday school teacher, but in a sense, she was my first Sunday school teacher. Why? Because my brother, Carlton Malone, had her as his Sunday school teacher. My brother would come home and teach me the things that she taught him. So I tell, whenever I see Sister Porter, I say, you were my first Sunday school teacher, because the things you taught my brother, he taught me. And I remember some of the things too. I don't want to get too long, but yes. Last time I saw Bishop Porter was at Brother Green's, Deacon Green's funeral about 3 or 4 years ago in Maywood, Illinois. Last time I saw Sister Porter was when she and I walked up to the altar together to pray for my brother. So I love the Porter family. Their oldest daughter, Deborah, was very fond of me. When I was 18 years old, I guess I thought I was a young, handsome man. And maybe she thought so too. But I think she saw my character, thought I was a good young man, fine young man. But she would joke with me, because she has 3 daughters. She would joke with me and say, I'm going to freeze you, Ed, put you in a time capsule and freeze you so that my daughters can grow up. One of them can grow up and marry you. Well, look at me now. I don't think Deborah's idea worked. I've aged. But anyway, that's my tribute to Bishop Claude Porter. I would like to conclude with a poem that I wrote about him, a poem that his friends and loved ones will understand, and that his enemies, if he had any, probably did, they never will. Bishop Claude Porter, he was authoritarian in structure, but expansive in practice. He centralized power, yet decentralized voice. He demanded honor. Yes, he did. Yet opened doors. So we can learn a lot from Bishop Claude Porter, and he will be missed.